Hi, welcome back to Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. I'm Alex Pavljuk, your host of this podcast, and I'm going to keep this really short today. Melissa, my dear friend, colleague, and co-host, will be joining me for this episode. We're going to talk about, this month's episode of Art News. We like to come back to this topic every once in a while. It's a good kind of benchmark for us, so not going to delay any longer. Our conversation starts now. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Alex.
We're back.
Yes, we are.
I don't know. Feel like this has been like our longest stretch since doing one of these.
It's been a while since we've done one, just the two of us.
Yeah. But alas, here we are. I'm done with my globe trotting.
Yes.
The Sarah Sands episode is out. I'm super thrilled with how it turned out and the conversation we had there. I'm still in recovery mode since all of my traveling and doing that episode. So, I thought it made sense to come back to home base and do our very routine art news episode.
Mm-hmm.
And plus we like to do it at least monthly. So I think this is a good time to come back to this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess we should just jump right into it. I do have a few articles to tee us off with, but I know we both have come with a specific topic. For those of you who maybe this is your first, maybe actually Museums Are For Me art news topic episode thing, whatever this is. We typically just kind of round off a few, of the most up to date as of recording this headlines, and then Melissa and I kind of do almost like a current event style, middle school reporting on two of, not necessarily the bigger stories, but stories that jump out to us.
We just each find one that we really want to dive more in depth into.
Yeah, and sometimes they relate to MAM. I mean, I view this podcast as more of a, the museum as a backdrop for larger conversations about art and museums in general. So, if they do connect to MAM, that's wonderful. But a lot of the time, it's really just us, having general discourse around, what's going on in the art world. But alas, should I jump into the headlines?
Yeah, let's do a quick rundown of some headlines.
All right. So the most poignant one kind of came out overnight, which tends to be a trend with a lot of these headlines. But Trump moves to dismantle Institute of Museum and Library Services. It's an executive order that demands workforce and operation reductions that, quote, the president has determined are unnecessary. Yeah, so it's that's something that's happening. From what I'm gathering, it's the service provides crucial financial support to the country's arts and culture, humanities and sciences, and literary, also education sectors, which I mean is coming obviously.
Probably
with the Department of Education cuts.
It probably supplies grants to institutions and things like that.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
The most prominent thing, which is probably coming in these large, large scale cuts that are kind of happening, $266.7 million in grants to museums and libraries across the U.S. and Puerto Rico in the fiscal year of 2024, which in the scope of, the billions we send to other places, it's not a whole lot of money. So it's kind of a shame to see this happen, but
it is, since I'm
alas.
Assuming that money is very crucial to the institutions that receive it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, that's the most timely of the news articles. I do have two more that are a little bit more uplifting and fun, but we tend to get into a lot of art crime, which is kind of strange. And I found a very interesting thing, but the headline is member of crime ring involved with Warhol and Pollock thefts gets prison time. I guess, on March 13th, a gentleman was, I think his name was Thomas Trotta, was given a prison sentence for his involvement in the theft of an Andy Warhol and Jackson Pollock paintings, as well as other artifacts and memorabilia across 2 decades. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. So one of the things that this guy apparently thefted in this ring. Obviously, Pollock and Warhol are like the two big names, but there's actually a local connection to this crime ring. Quote, in addition to the artworks, prosecutors said Trotta also admitted to the thefts of commemorative rings and MVP sports plaques with an estimated value of $500,000 from the Yogi Berra Museum of Learning in Little Falls, New Jersey. That's on Montclair State's campus. That's at my alma mater.
Wow.
I've driven past that museum a dozen times. It's at the old New Jersey Jackals stadium. So kind of crazy. Last one. Ready, Melissa?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. The Frick. It's back. It's nearly back.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The Frick glows with a poetic $220 million renovation. I believe they're opening in April.
Yeah, I've seen some notices that it's opening.
Yeah, the New York Times wrote a glowing write-up about the I guess the reorientation of the museum.
That's good.
And it's gonna be worth a visit, I think.
Okay, I can't wait to see pictures of it and what it looks like.
I'm excited. It looks really nice.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Alas, Melissa, what's your current event? What's your middle school current event?
So, my current event is about arguably the most famous or infamous art heist.
We're doing it
history.
again.
We're diving deep into these art thefts. So the title of the various articles that I've seen on news outlets have to do with that it's the 35th anniversary of, again, arguably the largest art heists in the history of the world. And so kind of just a little backstory. In March of 1990, two men dressed as police officers talked their way into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston in the middle of the night. And then over the course of the 81 minutes, they proceeded to steal 13 works of art from the museum. And now, 35 years later, since that happened, those men have still not been found, and none of the artworks have been recovered. They stole a number of paintings by artists like Degas and Vermeer and Rembrandt, and it is still a mystery of who these men were, where these artworks currently are. And since it's been 35 years to the day, basically, it happened on March 18th. We're recording this on March 19th. The Isabella Stewart Gardner has started this restoration project, and it's kind of brought everything back to light again.
Yeah.
There was a 4-part docu-series on Netflix about this art heist that came out in 2021, called This Is a Robbery. And that's kind of where a lot of people first learned about this, or it became kind of more mainstream to know about this. I watched that docu-series
Yeah,
back.
I mean, it sounds like it was probably a COVID-era docu-series, you know? It got the Tiger King effect.
So that kind of re-brought it all to light again.
Yeah.
And so at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the frames where a lot of these paintings hung are still hanging on the walls. They're just empty now. I think that has to do with the will of Isabella Stewart Gardner. This is all from her private collection, and she donated it and made this museum. And part of her last will and testament was that nothing in the collection could be sold, nothing could be removed. It all had to remain how it was in her life. So that's one of the reasons why these empty frames still hang up, but also a lot of the employees of the museum say it's a testament that we believe these artworks are still out there, and that one day they will come back here.
Yeah.
So they actually are in the midst of renovating one of the main rooms in the museum. It's called the Dutch Room, and that's where a majority of the paintings were stolen from. The largest painting that was stolen was a seascape by Rembrandt called The Storm on the Sea of Galilee.
Got it.
And they removed the frames for restoration purposes. They were cleaned and restored, and then they've been hung back up. They are restoring the floor of this room. They're redoing the ceilings. Like they're kind of giving it a makeover or a cleaning for the 21st century. And the head of security at the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum has been interviewed by a couple of news outlets, and he's been asked, like, again, do you think you're ever going to get these pieces back? Do you think they were destroyed? Because unfortunately that does happen to a bit of art that's stolen. You know, people can't do anything with it, so they destroy it. And he firmly believes that it has not been destroyed. He firmly believes that as time goes on, instead of losing hope, he is more encouraged that, like, as time goes on, the truth will come out, or people will come forward, or they will be found. So we're still looking, and all those works are worth about $500 million. And there is also a $10 million reward for anyone who has any information about where these works could be. I believe it's the largest reward offer for any stolen property.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, you know, it's still a part of ongoing investigations with the FBI. The FBI has a whole, like, art theft division of it.
Yeah.
And this is part of that. And yeah, so if you want to know more about this,
I thought you were going to say if you want $10 million.
No, well, I mean, yeah, if you have any information about any of these works, there's 13 things.
Stop hiding, cowards.
Still missing, yes. But I've actually been to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and it's beautiful. It's very fascinating. And yeah, they have all this information about the theft, and you can see again where these frames are. You can read about the works of art, and you can kind of learn more about, like, you can trace the robbers' theft steps of, like, how they got into the museum and how they walked through.
So it's kind of
everything.
become like a bit of an immersive experience.
Yeah,
I guess probably you know, emphasized by the Netflix doc.
Yeah. The Netflix doc, I highly recommend. I watched that too. It's really fascinating just to kind of see, because again, they have records. Like, it was 35 years ago, but they do have, they don't have, like, security footage or anything, but they have records of who was in and out of the museum that day. They interviewed the guard that was on duty when this happened. They had no cameras, but they had sensors, so they can see how the thefts, like, went into each room and the route they took. And yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's almost hard to believe that it's been 35 years and nothing has come out or nothing has been recovered.
I mean, it's the rare occurrence. I mean, I think of it like DB Cooper, like the guy who, like, stole all the money and jumped out of the plane. It's like, that's a pretty infamous one. Yeah. I guess technically, like, the Zodiac Killer in a lot of ways is still an infamous unsolved one. I think there's been a lot of investment into the Zodiac Killer. I think we have an idea of who it was, but we'll never know. But anyway, this is an art podcast. Not a podcast.
But
not a true crime podcast.
Also, just to, like, remark on it, I believe the last time any kind of sighting of any of these works or proposed sighting of them was 20 years ago, like in the Philadelphia area. So it's been 20 years since anyone has even supposedly seen any of these works.
Yeah, so. I mean, you wonder. I mean, this is kind of not necessarily something I was going to get into in my topic to come, but I think an interesting conversation is, like, you know, when we had a shared love here. You know, it was works by John Singer Sargent, Mary Cassatt, William Ayard Chase. The owners of that collection, you know, the Wall family, Carol and Terry Wall. I'd gotten to know Terry Wall a little bit as we were, like, you know, preparing that show, and we did an interview with his art dealer, Robert Simon, who is best known for his he owned the Salvator Mundi. He rediscovered it, and you know, there's a lot of controversy around that work. Is it a Leonardo da Vinci? Yada yada yada. And eventually, over time, it was acquired by, you know, a range of you know, wealthy oligarchs and, you know, Saudi princes, like stuff like that. And you know, there was a Netflix documentary called The Lost Leonardo that talked a lot about where high profile, controversially acquired art goes. and a lot of times it goes to these things called free ports. The most famous one is in Geneva, but it's essentially these like warehouses where art is kept, I think, tax-free, just essentially in storage in pretty much airports. Like these like kind of like, they're not like black sites or anything. Like people know where the free ports are. Probably not all of them, but at least this one in Geneva. And there's like they ran down a list of work that's held in pretty much just in limbo in these free ports. Picasso's, Pollock's, probably Rembrandt's, like masters that have been acquired privately, and are just kind of, no one will ever see them. Or in the case of what I'm about to talk about, maybe they don't go on sale for 40 years.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and you got to wonder, did these works probably make it through nefarious means to like a free port, and they'll just never see the light of day? Or in 2, 3, 4, 10 decades will it just appear? Because there's always, as we often talk about, there are always, for some reason, you think the last of a master has been found, and then a few more pop up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this is a good time to transition into my current event.
From stolen artwork
to acquired artwork. How Picasso became the ultimate prize for China's new collectors. Essentially, Chinese collectors are increasingly seeking Western masterpieces, specifically with Picasso becoming a overtly coveted prize. This trend was evident, by a recent Sotheby's auction in London, where a Picasso painting went for a very significant price. I believe that it was purchased for $4.3 million. And that's just one. It was the work Buste de Femme from 1953. It's a portrait that Picasso did of a muse and partner of his. It was sold to an unknown private agent collector. But essentially, this is not the first. This is one of a many string of Picasso acquisitions out of all of Asia, but most specifically China. In 2013, Christie's New York had a sale for an even more staggering price of $28.2 million to a Chinese conglomerate group, the Dylan Wanda Group. But essentially, I think it's a really interesting thing because, why is it that Picasso is becoming this character of interest for these collectors? I know here in the United States, we've talked about on this show how Van Gogh is like a very sought after painter. And, even though, obviously he does not originate from America, most of his works can be found in the United States in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's an interesting conversation to kind of talk about, like, why is it that Picasso is now getting this this treatment overseas in China? You talk about like the idea of, like, I think for a lot of these collectors, owning Western masterpieces is seen as like a status symbol. And, it's easy to say like, oh, it's just like an investment or whatever. But like, I think you do have to have like an appreciation for the work in a lot of ways to really want to drop that kind of coin. But I guess I could be wrong. But yeah. Any thoughts, Melissa?
I feel like Picasso is one of those names that kind of everyone, regardless of your knowledge of art or history, knows. Totally, he's a very recognizable name, which I think automatically elevates the supposed worth of his art.
Yeah.
It's funny because I feel like with artists like Picasso and his contemporaries, people think that was so long ago that they were working. It really wasn't. He lived until the 70s. I believe it was in the 70s that he died, which wasn't that long ago. So like he was working up until his death. And people, like, when people think of that, they just kind of focus on early 1900s when he was like first starting out. It's like his artwork like isn't that old.
No, I've seen the the portraits of him with the light doing the thing.
Yeah.
I've seen those. He was an old man in
but
those.
it's like this perspective of these supposedly old masters and how like how much distance there is between their world and ours, and it really isn't true. It's just a perspective that everyone has collectively decided to accept.
I think it's one of those things where, from what I've gathered from this article, and I think also the American appetite for Van Gogh, is that, you find, the differences, I think, at the time with Van Gogh's acquisition in the United States is they were relatively affordable at first.
When we were as a country buying his works, like, he wasn't famous, he wasn't popular. It was
exactly. And so the difference, the stark difference, is that these are
Picasso is well known, he is popular, he is seen as this formidable artist.
And I think you wonder why. I believe it was a Chinese collector that bought the banana. So,
I was thinking that too when you were talking about this.
So it's not uncommon for even modern art to spend millions of dollars for Chinese collectors. Well,
I feel like, again, people think of, not even just Western art, but Western countries have all these huge collections. Like, you go to Paris for all these great artworks, you go to Italy, which is true, but Asia has a lot of very notable art. Like, there's a couple Van Goghs that are in Asia, I believe in Japan. I'm not exactly sure where, but like a lot of these kind of late 1800s to the 1900s artists are in that part of the world.
And I think there was also, like, you talk about having, like, footholds and spheres of influence and stuff, and I think, from what I've gathered, Picasso had a relatively, I don't think he ever, from what I've gathered, I don't think he's ever visited, Asia in any capacity during his life, but he did have, a very unique influence on places like Hong Kong, as well as, museums in mainland China. Although, like, the shows remained, like, scarce. I think there was one in the 80s. There was another one, I think, from I could totally be misquoting this, but I'm pretty sure I read that of, like, just prints of his have shown. And it wasn't until the 2000s where, where China kind of emerged as this, like, art market powerhouse. And essentially, like, that pivoted into this real, taste for masters. And Picasso is the sort of, he's been consistently over the years, you can kind of see over the years, this continued, acquisition of at steep prices, these Picasso works. And it makes me wonder, obviously Picasso is, this thing that I think, very I don't want to say aggressive, but I would say maybe advantageous and excitable collectors are like, I need to, like, that's the new thing I gotta get
a Picasso.
And I wonder, like, what is the next, rather than Picasso, what is the next Van Gogh for collectors, where it's this an artist who at first maybe the works are, in today's day and age relatively affordable. Not something that either you or I could purchase, but, like, are relatively affordable, are, for the average collector can, feel like they can acquire, that will grow with time. Like, I wonder what that is. I think
I do too. I don't think I could ever be that type of collector who, like, buys art for the investment of it, because I just can't think of, like, oh, one day this person is going to be worth millions of dollars. Like, I just can't fathom, like, trying to think that far ahead.
I mean, that's not at all where I'm at in my life.
Think about. Neither.
I think, like, sometimes, we've been to a few of our colleagues' openings where they're selling art, and it's just, I think it's being in this world, it's an interesting concept to feel like you own art, you own a one of a kind, and we've obviously been around for, Art Uncorked, which is, an event we host where people bid on contemporary art, by some really renowned names in a lot of instances. But yeah, it's like, it's not necessarily something that I personally can see myself anytime soon ever getting into.
Yeah.
But I think it's really cool. And for people that are super invested in that, I think, I recently saw that artist Micheline Thomas is doing an interesting thing where she is hoping to open a door for young collectors to get their hands on a tangible, authentic work of hers that aren't necessarily her masterworks that, we have here at Montclair Art Museum, or, are on view at the American Art Museum in DC. Essentially what she's doing. And I actually wanted to talk about this, but I couldn't gather enough information. So I'm glad I'm getting to I didn't think I was going to be able to talk about this. She is essentially putting together a series of prints and silk screens of, I don't know if they're necessarily like already famous works or maybe like re-envisionments. I don't know if that's a word. Reimaginings of work she's already done. Maybe they're complete. I just don't know.
Yeah.
But essentially she's selling like a series of like somewhere between like 5 and 10 prints for like the relatively affordable price. Like they're all under $1,000 from what I saw. But they, are specifically like, these are my works. These aren't just prints. Like these are like I've had a creative say in this, but they're not like unobtainable. Like a very entry level collector can acquire one of these and be able to say they have a true Micheline Thomas. And that's
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. But alas,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a good place to kind of close this book. Anything else, Melissa, before we part ways? Happy birthday. I've been kind of holding that on, but today is your birthday.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this was nice getting to spend it talking about art.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my favorite things.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the end of this episode. So this has been Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this episode. If you're interested in visiting MAM, we're open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Please, favorite, save, subscribe, like, review, whatever your platform says to do. Please just do it for this show. Give us 5 stars, hit the follow button. We really, really appreciate all the support. It helps us a lot. And we love making this show, and knowing that people are listening is a really big deal for us. So again, this has been Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. Thank you, Melissa.
Sure thing.
I appreciate you always doing this with me. So that's it. We're done. I'm ending this right now.
Bye.